let me ask you to direct your attention to the book of Revelation, chapter 14. And if you have a Bible, you will notice a difference between the King James and the New King James, and your ESV, CSB, NASB, NIV at this point. Specifically, the NASB says, "Then I looked, and behold, the Lamb was standing on Mount Zion, and with him 144,000, having his name and the name of his Father written on their foreheads." Now, if you have the King James, it simply says, "having the name of his Father written on their foreheads." Let me add the parallel in here, double check. With him, 144,000, having his Father's name written on their foreheads, is the King James at that point, and the King James is following the Textus Receptus, which in its standardized form today does not have the phrase kai ta, ta anima autou. Instead, it simply says having ta anima tu patros autou, his Father's name written upon his forehead. Now, this is an important text. If you were doing a study of the relationship of the Father and the Son, the name of the Father, the same name of the Son, the relationship of he who sits upon the throne, the Lamb, because this is the Lamb was standing on Mount Zion. This would be an important text, and it would include the assertion having his name and the name of his Father written on their foreheads. And so that would indicate not only the exaltation and power of the Lamb, but the unity of the one who sits upon the throne and the Lamb in the redemption of the 144,000 and everything that's going to come after this in chapter 14. And so it is relevant that there is a major textual variant between the Textus Receptus and the modern Greek text as to whether, and this is unusual in that in the majority of instances, not all, but in the majority of instances, when you're looking at textual variants between the modern text and the TR is going to be longer, not shorter. But this is something that's missing in the TR that is present in modern text. And so your TR advocates and your King James only advocates would call it an addition, not something that's missing, because they take as their standard the TR or the King James. Now, what I wanted to show you graphically, got to take that down for me to do that. There we go. Here, for example, here is Codex Sinaiticus, and you can see right here, you've got ta anima, ta anima autou, kai ta anima tu, and then patras is a nomina sacra, so there's the line of the nomina sacra, and then autou, his Father, and here it's a tri-letter nomina right here. And so this is the reading from the early to mid 4th century. And it's also, interestingly enough, the reading of P47. We have very few papyri manuscripts of Revelation, but here is P47. And so here you have ta anima autou, kai ta anima tu patros, again, three-letter nomina sacra, autou. So his name and the name of his father, and there's Gegramenon having been written in the midst of the forehead. So early papyri, Revelation, Sinaiticus, Revelation, and here is a minuscule 757 from the 13th century. And I put this up because, you know, I've shown you a lot of unsealed texts, majuscule texts, but we don't see a lot of, we don't show as many minuscules. And so this is from the 13th century. And here you have ta anima autou, and then you have, interestingly enough, ta anima tu patros is in an interesting, that's how the pi is written in this particular manuscript, but it's also written as a nomina sacra, autou. And so this is nearly a millennium later in what would be considered, I think, a primarily Byzantine manuscript, and it contains the reading as well. Now, why do I show you these things other than the fact that we've got some weird people in the audience who like seeing stuff like that? Well, I show it to you because of the fact that there really is no question in the mind of 99.5% of New Testament scholarship, and the other 0.5% are TR advocates, I would say, if there are that many, as to the original reading, because there is exactly one manuscript, I think it's 1773, from the 14th century, that does not have this. Every other manuscript, Byzantine, Alexandrian, doesn't matter what you call them, even if you don't want to use those terms, the vast majority reading. There's one manuscript that doesn't. Just one. 1773. All the manuscripts have his name and the name of his father. So there really isn't any question here, because it's easy to see why, when you repeat the word anima, that one of those animas could get lost because you're repeating a word. It is a common error of sight in human beings when words are repeated to have a problem in transcribing them. And by the way, if you think that's some modernistic, naturalistic, textual critical thing that I shouldn't believe because I'm a Christian, Erasmus said it constantly in his annotations. Constantly. It is well known by anyone who reads Erasmus in the annotations that he fully understood concepts such as the most difficult reading, considering what could have given rise in the corruption of the scribes. He talks about the corruption of the text and believes that both the Latin and the Greek manuscripts experienced corruption. This is what Erasmus said. The originator of your text utilized all these things. You cannot, on the one hand, accept his work and say, this is it. And on the other hand, say, you can't talk about that stuff. You can't, if you use the term corruption, you're a bad naturalist. Well, then Erasmus was a bad naturalist. And I can imagine there's some guys who would say, yep, he was, but what he produced was still done by God. Okay. I'll read you somebody that says exactly that. Jabril Jury. I'll read you something, because that's basically what he's saying. Is I don't care about all that. I don't care what Erasmus said or what he did or how I got my text. I just want to have my text. I don't want to have any questions about it. That's how it works. So the point is, there's not even, there's no indication in the critical text today of any type of variant there until you get the CNTTS. Then there's the one manuscript where you have this, and the minuscule from which Erasmus copied Revelation 28:14. This was, in all probability, a simple scribal error on Erasmus's part, or he did ask for some help with producing Revelation from that one man. He only had one manuscript. That's all he had. And it had a commentary involved in it, so you had to pull stuff out. And there were numerous times, we'll look at one in just a moment, there were numerous times where Erasmus actually translated from Latin into Greek, not just the last 6 verses. There are other places in Revelation where he filled in by translating from Latin into Greek and created readings that are still in the TR today that have never been found in Greek manuscript anywhere in the world. So if you are a TR only guy, you believe that God re-inspired the Bible in 1516. You can't get around it. You can't get around it. If you insist this is the form, then you have to sit there and say, and that means that when they were debating the deity of Christ to Council of Nicaea, they did not have the right text. At Council of Chalcedon, nope, didn't have the right. Nobody, Augustine writing all of his stuff, that deep, didn't have the right text. That right text would not come back around again until 1516. When Erasmus, rushing to produce a text in a book that he really viewed as being deuterocanonical. He just didn't view it as being all that important. So much so that, for the second edition, hey, fix that stuff at the end of the book with this other one over here, which was actually based on his own. So it never got fixed, and nobody really knew about it for 300 years. And he didn't go back and look. Neither did the rest of the people working on it. See, everybody's got this idea that there were these people and they're comparing manuscripts and they're doing all that. No. Between 1516 and the translation of the King James Version, a period of war and violence in Europe. And you might be able to pop up Accordance or Logos and look at manuscripts, go over to CSNTM and look at manuscripts. They could not. They couldn't do that. There weren't people doing that. It just wasn't happening at that point in time and wouldn't for quite some time. So this idea of the cleansing, of the purifying of the text, is baloney. It didn't happen. You're assuming something you can't prove. It didn't happen. So what happens here, so the reason that the Textus Receptus does not have this is not, I could not prove, I can't absolutely disprove, but I don't believe that there is any connection whatsoever between the Mount Athos 1773 manuscript and Erasmus's work at all. I don't have any evidence that he was even aware of it. So it seems that twice in the transmission history of the text, which is not unusual, an error was made because of ta anima being to anima being mentioned twice. Erasmus makes that error and doesn't fix it. And that's why it's in the TR. Every manuscript the Christians had been reading other than 1773. So for the first 1,300, let's say it was written around 1,200 years, all Christians had read the same thing. Are you telling me that they were misled at Revelation 14:1? That the connection between the Father and the Son, his name, the name of his Father, that truth was not known until Erasmus? Really? Think about what this means, guys. Think about what it means, the whole concept of the inspiration of Scripture. When you take the stance that I'm going to be reading from some of these people, when you take that stance, what are you doing to the inspiration of Scripture? To the very nature of it? Are you thinking this through? This is not defensible in debate. It's not defensible in debate. So I've shown you the readings, the antiquity of the phraseology, the unanimous antiquity The early church fathers didn't quote it any other way. There is no question here. If you hold the TR reading, you are saying that the entire manuscript history of the first 1,200, 1,300 years of the church was wrong until Erasmus mistranscribed 28:14.